Hardly. Your shoulder's getting hot.
Hi everyone, I'm just going to give it a minute for people to log in. Thank you for coming.
I did.
Well, I might just have to share after the fact on Facebook because it's not allowing me to go live for some reason, but that's okay. All right, we good? Oh. Hi, Jacqueline. All righty. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight, both to our panelists and our audience. My name is Danielle Angelari, and I'm the Executive Director of NAMI Northern Illinois. For those of you who are unfamiliar with our organization, we are an affiliate of the National Alliance on Mental Illness and the nation's largest grassroots organization dedicated to improving lives of individuals and families living with mental illness. Our group specifically serves Winnebago, Boone, and surrounding counties in our region. And though we do not offer clinical services, we are a very active part of our community. We support those in need through various peer-led support groups. We educate families in our community. We advocate by helping to shape public policy and programming for people with mental illness and their families. We lead many awareness events and activities to fight stigma, encourage understanding, and keep in the forefront of everyone's minds that mental health care is important. We also provide the tools and resources necessary to improve response to mental illness for all. To begin tonight, I just want to share a few updates on our end. As our community's COVID-19 protocols change, so do our support group locations. So for adults living with mental illness, we offer 2 weekly groups, both on Fridays and Sundays. For teens and young adults with mental illness, we offer 2 groups for each a month. For families that are caregivers of adults, we offer 3 different groups, and we have 2 monthly meetings for parents and caregivers of children. Many of our meetings are back in person, but a few remain virtual. If you'd like a full list, please provide me your email in the chat box and I will send one your way. We're also always in search of additional support group leaders that have the peer perspective and other types of volunteers, so please let me know if you're interested in something of that nature as well. Finally, our next community education program will be held on February 18th at 5:30 p.m. over Zoom, and the topic will be perinatal mental health with Amanda Hahn from the Dahlia Center for Perinatal Mental Health. You can register for that via our website or Facebook page. Now on to the main event. So an official launch of our Crisis Co-Response Team pilot program for our area was announced in mid-October of 2020. Cities and counties across the country are increasingly adopting promising co-responder models to improve how they engage with people experiencing behavioral health crises. Co-responder models vary in practice, but generally involve law enforcement and clinicians working together in response to calls for service involving a person experiencing a behavioral health crisis. The model provides law enforcement with appropriate alternatives to arrest, as well as additional options to respond to non-criminal calls. Communities can use this model to develop a continuum of care that results in reduction of harm, arrests, and use of jails and emergency departments. The system promotes the development of and access to quality mental health and substance use disorder treatment and services. Our local team is comprised of individuals from Rosecrans Health Network, the Rockford Police Department, and the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department. During the pilot, Unit members will not only respond, but also provide follow-up in connection to community resources. I know that there are many questions, as there were many people registered for this tonight, so please, if you would type them in the chat or question and answer box, and I will facilitate, moderate, and read them to the team after they're finished with their presentation. Again, thank you all for taking your time to learn about this valuable resource. And now I'd like to introduce you to Detective Stacy Beeman and Detective Dave Sarasa of the Rockford Police Department, Deputy Tiffany Eisman of the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department, and Victoria De La Rosa and Christy Wilson of Rosecrans Health Network to speak with you about the Crisis Co-Response Team. Also, Lieutenant Randy Burke is here too. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. We're just going to go through a presentation that kind of explains who we are and what we do. And then we can kind of give you the answers that you might have to some of the questions that we don't cover throughout the PowerPoint. Our team members here, obviously we came into this during the time of COVID, so we've been masked up a lot of the time, but we're working through that and have been out on the street a lot to meet with some of the people in Rockford. Our mission statement, the Crisis Co-Response Team will utilize a co-responder model, meaning that partners with law enforcement and mental health professionals to improve community wellness through a collaborated community response. So that's kind of a lot to explain, but we'll kind of go through some of the stuff that we're doing. The goal of the CCRT is to bridge the gap between law enforcement's current response to behavioral health crises to promote safe encounters by partnering with behavioral health professionals. Through the development of this collaborative partnership, the CCRT intends to engage, stabilize, link, and follow up with those experiencing a behavioral health crisis to promote individual stabilization and strengthen community wellness. So some of our goals is to assist those that we come into contact with and or the referral to the CCRT via police report, officer referrals, we have people calling us all the time, or community referrals to promote safer encounters between citizens in need of crisis services and the police department personnel while maintaining a high level of professional police service. The CCRT will refer, link, and encourage participation in appropriate mental health services, substance use treatment, and or any other services may fit the citizen's need. The CCRT believes that the above positive contacts and linkage to services are critical to an overall healthier, safer community and are aimed at facilitating more stable community members. So the proactive approach of our team is utilizing the police calls for service, including but not limited to suicidal despondent subjects, overdose, mental health transports to identify these community needs that are members that are in need. The proactive approach includes case management of frequently encountered subjects in an attempt to reduce the number of 911 calls and avoid any future crisis situations with that individual. The proactive approach also includes public education, similar to this, to reduce the stigma about mental and behavioral health, as well as educating the public about the opioid use and prevention efforts aimed at all sectors of the community. We also work with a reactive approach. We use this co-response model teaming up with mental health professionals from Rosecrans when we follow up with these subjects experiencing mental behavioral health crisis, because they're the professionals on this side of it. So they respond with us to the calls. We're going to respond to these follow-ups with these professionals to all the documented calls for service. The goal of this follow-up is to address the needs of the people in mental health crisis, provide them with the necessary services, which may reduce the calls for service involving the person in the crisis. So we talk about mental health crisis, and it can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people. So we're coming into situations that we may never have experienced before, and they may never have experienced before. So it's a situation in which a person's actions, feelings, and behaviors can lead them to hurting themselves or others, and or putting them at risk of being unable to care for themselves or function in the community in a healthy manner. So that's pretty broad, and so we're kind of getting ourselves into a lot of calls for service that they may never have been involved in, and that's where we are starting to understand that a mental health crisis not only affects the person involved, but it affects their family and the members of the community. So we strive not only to help the person experience a mental health crisis, but also provide the family and friends with the necessary resources to help. This is something our team came up with that we bring with us on calls and pass out. This is a trifold, but this is kind of the front and two parts of the back of this. This kind of gives the office numbers on the bottom right of the front page, and then we each have our business cards attached to it with our cell phones. It's going to give you a bunch of different resources within the community. On this back page is kind of some of the community health and hospitals with behavioral health. Our mission statement and who we are, what we do is on the back, as well as artwork from one of the panelists that presented to us when we were training from NAMI. And then the middle section of the trifold has a bunch of different resources, because at any given time, the person in need might have more than one area of need, and this is kind of provide them with a bunch of different areas in case something else comes along or they come into contact with someone, or family can kind of reach in or step in and help reach out to some of these sources. So that's kind of who we are and what we do, and we'll open it up to questions. I know it was brief as to what we put through the PowerPoint, because I think we're better able to explain what we do and how we do it through the questions you guys are going to have for us.
There's a question. Could you guys introduce yourselves just so people can put a face to the name?
I'm Tiffany Eisman with the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department.
I'm Victoria De La Rosa. I'm a clinician with Rosecrans.
I'm Christy Wilson. I'm also a mental health clinician with Rosecrans.
I'm Detective Stacy Beeman from Rockford Police Department.
Detective David Sarasa with the Rockford Police Department.
Someone asked, would you mind me sharing this PowerPoint with the group for reference afterwards?
Oh, sure, that's fine.
Okay, cool. There's another question. Do you have a place that you usually take people or will take people when you respond to a call?
Yeah, I guess, it all depends on the type of call it is, but, for substance abuse, there's places that we can take those that want to get help for that. There's the campus on Harrison. If it's obviously someone with suicidal ideations or along those lines, we can take them to the hospital or Mulberry Center or, any other organization that will help us out with that. So I guess it really all depends on what type of help the client needs.
Sure. Thank you.
Hey, Danielle, can you see us, or is this, are we stuck in the PowerPoint?
No, I see you guys just fine.
Okay.
What happens if there is more than one call at a time? Do you have different priority levels if help is needed immediately, especially if you only have one professional available at a time?
So it again, it depends on the kind of call that we get. There a lot of times if we're doing follow-up, maybe what the crisis that the individual is going through, we'll kind of assess what the needs are and what that individual needs. And then we kind of look at our the services that we can provide and see where we might be able to link them. Sometimes we do more hand-holding than other times. Sometimes we have clients who are able to kind of get connected to services on their own. But we will facilitate or coordinate services kind of at a variety, whether it's somebody who needs a food pantry referral or somebody who needs transportation, find out about transportation, or somebody who needs immediate help and needs to be assessed right away. It just really kind of depends. A lot of times we go out in pairs, or sometimes we go out as a team. So it really depends on the call that comes in.
Thank you. Do you have a medical partner of this team? I
We
assume you mean
are,
for physical health.
we are working with Rockford Fire's Mobile Integrated Health. But during the pilot, I guess we focus directly on mental health and the calls for service we're dealing with, but there is a lot of overlap between that. And we're finding out just how much that is as we partner with them as well. So we have not yet, but we've been in contact with them where we're dealing with the same person and trying to provide the services they might need, which are further widespread than just the mental health services that we're providing.
At the Mulberry location, there's also Crusader Clinic now, takes appointments for any client's medical needs. So we can have access to that and link them that way through the Mulberry Center.
But real quick on that, this team isn't specifically for medical issues. We deal with, the substance abuse, behavioral health, mental health. So that would be more along the lines of the mobile integrated health that the fire department has.
Thank you. Someone says, I have a training background and a master's in public health and undergrad counseling. Is there any thought of using volunteers on any level, possibly as volunteer community educators?
So our program right now is still in its infancy. We've been operating just a little over 60 days. We're still in the pilot phase of it. We do want to grow our program. We hope that there will be opportunity to use volunteers and to expand the program, with additional staff. What we want to do ultimately is lighten the load of the police department when it comes to, or law enforcement when it comes to responding to these kinds of mental health issues. I would say that, it's something that we would definitely consider for the future when the program is out of the pilot stage.
Thank you. What's your protocol from the onset of a call once it's received and dispatched?
Oh, I guess I'll kind of take that on where we don't do a lot of listen for dispatch calls to come out and respond directly. With the unit we are doing follow-up care for anyone that has a call for service for any of the listed that we said, anything involving mental health, substance abuse. We are following up with those individuals so they get the follow-up care they need. So when police have a response to their residents or wherever they are, and they either get transported by ambulance or go to the hospital for mental health assessment, then we step in at that point. So they're receiving the follow-up care to prevent further crisis at that time. It's not to say that we have not responded directly to calls, but the patrol officers for each of our divisions are still responding directly to the initial call for service. And we may respond as a secondary unit to that, depending if we've already had rapport with the subject or already had contact with them, so we can assist in those. But our primary function is follow-up right now to make sure that the people are getting the support services they need on the back end after a call for service.
Thank you. What hours is your team operational?
Right now, we're operating Monday through Friday, 8 to 4.
Is there a website that you guys have, or especially to download any resources that you might have? Like your
We don't
brochure?
currently have a website.
But that sounds like a wonderful suggestion for us to work on.
Do you have any resources in Spanish?
So as a clinician, I happen to be bilingual. I speak English and Spanish, and we have dealt with several calls involving not just Spanish, but other languages of other populations that are spoken in other languages that are spoken in our community. I think we've dealt with some African languages and Karen, some Asian languages. When we do encounter this type of case, we use a language line. We have a service that has been very helpful. We're able to utilize that in office and out on the street. And we find that clients are very responsive to that service. When you're able to engage a client in their own language, it's just one more step at building rapport.
Thank you. So I guess piggybacking off that one, how are you outreaching to the immigrant and refugee communities, and how do you handle cultural barriers within the communities?
So Rosecrans and law enforcement in the area, we really want to work with our population and meet our clients where they are. As a team, we try to be very culturally competent and, keep in mind the specific barriers, whether they are language barriers or, cultural shock, maybe some differences with somebody who might be newer to the community or newer to the country. These are all things that we try to keep in mind when we go out and engage the population. And so just being aware and trying to bring services that are appropriate for that client and what that client needs. I think that's a good start. So I think we're doing a good job there.
Can you walk us through a scenario type of call?
Yeah, sure. So, how it all starts is patrol will respond. I mean, we can just take an overdose, for example, to an overdose. The person will get taken to the hospital. The officer writes a report. The report gets forwarded to us, where every morning we will sift through all the overdoses, mental health type calls, mental health transports. And then we take that overdose call, gather the information, the person's address, all that stuff, where we can go and follow up with them. So we'll go knock on the door. We have a 3 contact approach with every case, where if we don't get contact at the door, we'll make a phone call. We'll leave our pamphlet, our cards at the door. And by the 3rd time, if we haven't gotten any type of contact via phone or in person, we'll send a letter out. That way we can try to make any type of contact possible. And then obviously if we do make contact, we provide them all the resources that we can. We try to get them linked with any kind of services to help them out in the future so that they don't have another overdose scenario. It's all voluntary, so that's the difference in our program is anytime we go meet with somebody, if they tell us they don't want services or they don't need us, we have to leave. So it's all voluntary. If they don't want it, we have to leave the property. So I don't know if that answers questions, but that's kind of how we take all the calls for service.
We also try to leave the families with the education pamphlets also, so that even if the client isn't willing to accept our services, the family will have some sort of information for future use.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry, there are a ton of questions. I'm trying to put them in order of where they make sense. So when you mentioned mental health transport, can you elaborate what that means?
Yeah, we get all types of calls, and officers will go to a scene where maybe they're not suicidal, they haven't they haven't overdosed, but they are off a little bit as far as maybe they don't know where they're at or they don't know what day it is, and they decide to transport them to the hospital, and it's voluntary, so they'll write it up. So that's just it's a name that we use for a report. It's a mental health transport report that they wrote, and just another type of report that we follow up with.
And that might be a transport to one of the hospitals. It's been to the Rosecrans triage facility as well. But it's someone that the officer is viewing that is having some sort of mental health crisis, but is not in an involuntary admission at the hospital necessarily. They're willing to go because they're not understanding what's happening as well. We're trying to get them the help they need. That report still comes to us to follow up and continue to make sure that they're getting the care they need.
Sure. How long is the pilot program, and how will you determine its efficacy?
So the pilot program is for 90 days. We started right after Thanksgiving. So we've been operating for just a little over 60 days. So we're kind of at the tail end, and we are still developing. We are still, growing as a program in our skills and in the services that we provide to the community. But one of the benchmarks that we are looking at is a decrease in calls to 911. Rosecrans wants to assist law enforcement in our community and really try to meet the client's needs when it comes to mental health services, engage clients who maybe otherwise would not be engaged in services.
So in the first 60 days, how many times has the team responded to a crisis situation?
Oh, they just
Respond or follow up. I mean, if you're asking how many people that we have, I would say on our caseload, or how many we've had in contact with, we're talking about like 325, 350 people in the first 60 days.
Yeah, and I believe that that's unique individuals. So those are individuals that have called and we've responded to not returning calls. Those are our first response to individuals. So right around 350, give or take.
Thank you.
That shows us how much there's a need out there for this type of service.
All right. Is the team equipped to support people with intellectual disability suffering from a mental/behavioral health crisis?
So we try to focus our efforts on mental health and behavioral health. If we were faced with something that is outside of our capacity, like maybe developmental disabilities, we would try to refer, because a big portion of what we do is refer, advocate, and link. So, we would, if it's something that's beyond our grasp, then we would refer to one of our partners in the community.
What areas are serviced?
All of Winnebago County at this point.
The entire Winnebago County.
If there is a completed suicide, what resources do you provide to the families? Example, is there information provided regarding the Northern Illinois Survivors of Suicide Support Group?
Actually, the information that we've had, that we go to the house, the residents talk to the family, provide, actually it came from NAMI, their list of grief resources that's widespread with a bunch of different numbers on it, just to let them know they're not alone in a situation like that, as well as leave our information, because although something happened in their family, they might be in need of services themselves as a result. And so kind of giving them our information and our card so they're not feeling alone in a situation where it's obviously they're going through a difficult time.
And obviously, we are willing to expand the resources that we provide to the community. So if anybody that's listening or anybody that's viewing this would like to have their resource added to our materials, please get that information to us.
Yeah, I would be happy to help facilitate that. Like I said, with emails from participants today, if you'd like them, guys. Could you take us through a typical, is there a difference between a younger individual versus an adult? Have you noticed with calls? Have you been experiencing any of that?
I wouldn't say there's any difference of how we handle it. We still do our follow-up with them and still try to link the juvenile, with any type of services we can.
Yeah, we would, of course, link them to the appropriate level of care for their age.
Do you guys see this program growing outside of Winnebago County because of the work you've started?
We've seen a lot of interest brought to the management over at Rosecrans. I know has explained that there's been a lot of interest in, Chicago or other suburbs that have been asking kind of how we're doing it and how we're moving forward. So I think I see some expansion there.
What can be done when people need to make a call for help with a mental health issue but are afraid of the police reaction or treatment towards them?
In a 911 call per se?
That seems like.
Okay, for a 911 call, our officers that are responding do have the basic level of training for crisis intervention, as well as us. So it's not the first time they're necessarily seeing an issue like this. It might be the first time they're dealing with that person, but they're not coming into it with no training at all. They're coming in with street level training as well. We have training within the department as well as prior to becoming a police officer at the academy, where we're learning de-escalation, crisis intervention, and becoming aware of some of the mental health diagnosis that we might be dealing with and what comes along with them. Specifically for our team, we went through mental health first aid to kind of go through all of the common disorders that we might see and things that we might see within that disorder. So we kind of know what we might be dealing with or what we might be presented with. And honestly, I know we're 8 to 4 Monday through Friday, but we're getting calls all the time, weekends, nights, from our officers like, hey, I know that you've been dealing with this. Can you help me on this? So our officers are more than willing to reach out if they're in a situation that's uncomfortable for them or beyond what they're trained to do. And they're reaching out to us for assistance. And we kind of have our mental health professionals on call with us as well, whether they like it or not, to answer the questions that we might not be able to answer. And that's why I think it's been truly an advantage to have them on a scene with us when we're following up with someone. From the police side of it, you're getting a mental health professional with you to answer the questions that I might not be able to answer and provide the resources that they may have a better knowledge of. So I think that's been, truly beneficial.
I think it's also important that when people are calling 911 for a behavioral health issue, they need to let dispatch know that. Because then dispatch can also relay that to the police officers. It's kind of like giving them a heads up that they're coming into a behavioral health crisis and not a legal issue, if you will. So I think it's kind of important to just kind of let them know, that the family member who's calling, that it is a mental health or behavioral health call.
Thank you. Have you received positive reaction from people you've been having experiences with?
Very, very much so. When we first started and we would introduce ourselves, we'd go to the door a lot of times too. They see the police, and as soon as we let them know you're not in trouble, you see them relax instantly. We kind of explain the program, and they can't say enough nice things about how this service has been needed, and this is wonderful, and they're so happy we're around to do this. So that's what I think all of our experiences has pretty much.
I think the family members are the ones that are really expressing their gratitude to this unit. When their loved ones are dealing with some type of mental illness or substance abuse, we see it from the family members of how thankful they are that we're trying to get them into services.
How are you currently funded? Again, I'm sorry, the questions are a little all over the place.
How are we currently funded?
Yes.
Through our own departments.
The Rosecrans and the individual police departments are currently funding the program.
From the law enforcement side, do you have your contacts sign a release for services?
I guess I don't know what they're asking. When we respond to the residents, it is a voluntary program. We're asking them if they are okay with us as the police department and Rosecrans being involved in their life, and if we can help them in any way to get linked with services that they may need, whether they know exactly at that point what services those are. We're providing them with options, and they're completely up to them 100% whether they want to be involved or not.
Right, because what we do is we advocate, we link, and we coordinate services. So we're not providing ongoing counseling. Christy and I, as clinicians, we're there to offer support and maybe some very short-term counseling in the moment. But we're not providing, say, case management or ongoing services or any kind of clinical treatment.
So you guys already answered this. There's a couple of questions. What happens if there's a crisis situation outside of your hours? You've already kind of touched on that.
We are available to the best that we can be.
Right.
We also have, the two of us are hostage negotiators, so our availability becomes larger than just the unit's availability because we are on call for those units as well. So our training and background kind of comes with that. But honestly, we don't know the true scope of that until, we hope that there's not a major incident, but that is something that we are there for. I guess if we've already dealt with a person, if we've already built rapport with them, they're immediately, our departments are immediately going to call us as resources, whether we're able to respond in person or not, to help provide some insight into what this person might be going through. If it's, a barricaded subject or a further crisis and we've dealt with, but we've already been dealing with them, we've built rapport, we've linked them to services, then our departments would be calling us and contacting us to try and give them any information they could to help resolve it peacefully.
And we hope with the expansion of the program and it's growing, that we will increase the hours, of course. Crisis doesn't have a time limit. It doesn't, no time of day. So with it just being a pilot and starting off with just the 5 of us, that's kind of where we started it, the need, and we hope to increase those hours of service.
And just answering this Boone County question, it does not serve Boone County, correct?
Correct.
Not at this time.
Going back to the developmental intellectual disability, I think someone was more so asking like if it's a co-occurring disorder, so they also have a mental illness. Does this program also serve them? They're inclusive to them? I would imagine so.
Absolutely, yeah. We're not exclusive to anything really. The calls for service come in, and even the officers on scene may not know all of the diagnosis or may not know all that's going on, but as we're providing those resources, one thing may lead to another. Simple fact, we had a call for an adult that then brought up, well, could I get some help with my child too, or vice versa? Or, one child might be involved, but it's a whole family that's needing the help, whether it be developmental or mental health. We're dealing with both of those because it becomes a whole family issue at that point.
We often see co-occurring situations, oftentimes with mental health and substance abuse. So we will see which need is greater. As far as Rosecrans is concerned, we often think of like Mulberry for their mental health or outpatient services, and then of course the Harrison campus for substance abuse. So we just kind of go with what we think the highest need is for that client. They can receive both services, just which one are they going to receive first?
You mentioned taking some individuals to the hospital, Rosecrans. Do you provide referrals to other providers in the community as they're needed?
Yes, we do.
Are you tracking the team success in diversion from the ER or jail at this time?
Right now, our documentation is, we have people who have, let's talk about something co-occurring when you're having a criminal offense occur at the same time as a mental health crisis occurs, okay? So we have been working with the state's attorney's office to figure out the greater need. If this person, if it's in a mental health crisis and that's the reason for the crime that occurred, we're working with the state's attorney's office to help address the mental health needs prior to any criminal offense, if that makes sense.
I think it would be interesting to take a look at what our numbers are at the end of the pilot time and compare them to, past years and see what kind of results we had. But that's not something that we're doing right now.
Sure. Could you share any success stories with us anonymously, of course?
There's a lot. We've definitely had a lot of good success stories. It's hard to do when you're not, trying to bring up names or things like that or specific incidents. But, there's been cases where we've had a large outstanding bill, which was a deterrent to get help because he couldn't pay that bill. We've worked with the facility that he had that bill, had to reduce it so that he could get in for treatment. So things along those lines have been a good success story, and there's other ones.
Right. We often have also talked to clients who, don't have insurance because maybe they don't have employment, and so they don't have insurance that's tied to their job, and then they believe that they may not be able to engage in services. So with those kind of individuals, we are able to link them to a benefits specialist who's able to then help them apply for state Medicaid, or whether that's a link card or whether whatever kind of benefit that they might need, and then also they're able to get linked up with mental health services as a result. We've had that happen a number of times. We've also been able to link a few veterans in the area who didn't know that there were services available to them. So I would say that these would be the success stories that we're looking at.
We have utilized Lifescape for some of the over 65 clients. We might, give them the services, the food pantry services, and they might need ramp and they might need Lifescape. So it's not just one type of service. It's really geared toward their individual needs.
We also work with the homeless. Part of what we do, we obviously see things, mental health crisis or mental health issues going on with the homeless. And we are working with them not only to address their mental stability, but also getting them a stable place to live, not on the street. So they're kind of co-occurring in that sense. So we're working one thing at a time, but letting them know, we're working on both ends of it and not just one thing at, one of their issues. We're going to try and address all of them, but one at a time.
would you agree that we need more facilities such as Rosecrans in our community to divert people from places like the ER?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And a lot of the housing, the places that house to offer the services that, that population that would have once been at, Singer before they closed, is a good place for some of the population. And they can have some 24-hour kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, they get looked at after, and checked on and kind of in a 24-hour setting of apartment building, so.
Do you think that the program will change at all when the 988 number for the mental health crisis line comes about, I believe next year? So
I'm not
that's,
sure what that is.
they're taking the suicide prevention hotline and reducing the numbers so people can call it kind of like 911. Do you think it will change at all what you're doing?
I don't think it's going to change what we're doing, but I think it would be beneficial.
Are you tracking, are you following up again after you make the initial referral to people to make sure they're linked with the service?
Yeah, that's kind of an important part of the program too, because to just hand them a piece of paper and say, hey, get yourself down to Weir Center and, sign up for an appointment isn't always very helpful. So, we want to make sure that when we do get an appointment that they are going to it and they are receiving services and getting into some permanent situation of services and not just a temporary Band-Aid. We want to get them in, long-term of whatever it is they're seeking.
Because oftentimes, the time that we're called or the time that law enforcement is called, when Rosecrans becomes involved is often during a crisis. But that's not necessarily the ideal time to become involved. With the populations that we see, it's actually when things are kind of settled and when people are reasonable and when people are like in a good state, that's when we want to, follow up and make sure that services have been linked, that the client is being engaged in the services that they need.
And when we talk about the number of people that we have at least been brought to our attention, you're talking about, 325, 350 people with a minimum of 3 contacts to attempt to reach them. And those are being generated, the initial calls being generated by calls for service at their residence or wherever they're at. If they were to call 911 again for any reason, that 3 attempts of contact to try and get them linked to services starts over at 0. So we're continuing, even though they may have been either linked or refused services at that point, we're again attempting that 3-step, like, listen, we can help you. These are some of the resources we use, just getting them to trust us, I guess. And it might not be the first contact or the second contact. It might be the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th contact. But in the end, if they were calling 911, 5-6 times a week, and now they're maybe only calling 911 once, have we reduced that call? Us being able to track that, all we're trying to do is help on the side for what services they might need. And if it does reduce the 911 calls, that's a great thing, because they can use us as a resource in between there and contact us. And I don't think that even most of the people we've had only 3 contacts with, it's constant, like, hey, how you doing today? Did you get to your appointment yesterday? How'd it go? What do you need today? So it's more than we really even know how many times we've contacted people, but hoping that we're the link that they need to stick with the services so they can be stable in the community.
It's pretty much the minimum is 3, but some of the clients we might have spoken to, 6, 7, 8 times, and not because they were in crisis. That was just to keep them on track with their treatment.
If you have a client that needs transportation services, do you have linkages for that? Do you take them? Okay.
We have available to us some free bus passes that we've given to clients in need. We also started in cases where with Rosecrans that they now have Uber Health, where we can give special situations consideration on that. And actually the team has actually taken clients. We try not to make that too much of a a permanent thing, because if that was the case, then all we'd be doing is transporting clients back and forth from their appointments and not actually keep servicing the community. But we haven't had, out of the 350 calls that we've had so far, we've never had failed anyone due to transportation. We might have used something different for each one, but the transportation has never been an issue. Would you guys agree?
How does a different community or county implement CCRT? And would you be willing to have a CIT officer from Illinois come observe you for the day to ask more questions?
I would have to be in management.
Yeah, I think that that's a question for management. I know that, you know, the talks to get the team started, those happened way before we signed on. But, you know, we did a lot of observation with the team in Elgin. And I know that our Rosecrans management talks and has referred often to other teams. I don't know if it was in Iowa or Ohio, Oregon maybe. So, you know, I would say contact other municipalities, other cities that have these sorts of programs and see what kind of resources or options they use to get their teams going.
Yeah, prior to this starting, we reached out, excuse me, to Madison PD. They've got a pretty large unit that does what we do. Again, Elgin, Aurora. I know we got information from Oregon, California. There's units all over the place that are implementing these things. So they just have to reach out and you know, and do their own research and develop their own team.
And I don't think there's a blank template for, you know, this is what we do and this is what will work for your community. We're adapting daily only because we don't know exactly what we're going to need on a given day. I mean, things that we never thought we would be doing, or, you know, what resources might even be available are new to us. So we're constantly learning and adapting to the situations that we're being presented with. And that's something that I don't think you can say, you know, this is how it's going to work for each community. It's individualistic.
I think it has to be geared towards that particular community's needs. Because I know, you know, with Belvedere, they run, I believe it's an opiate program with the police. And that's their biggest need, maybe today, but maybe not tomorrow. So I think, you know, we hope to see and help other people expand. This is a great service for the community, and I think it needs to be available to everyone.
Can a local organization set up a time to meet with you guys to talk about themselves as a resource?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you making referrals to the mental health court, drug court, or youth recovery court?
We are, yep. So the pilot program is really just the basis of this program that we have. We want to extend it into working with state's attorneys, defense attorneys, and you know, working that portion into our unit. So once we get past this pilot, we're definitely diving into all that. I know currently we're working on cases where we're trying to get people into drug court that maybe weren't referred because they weren't getting help, but now they are. So we're definitely working on it, and it's something that we're going to be doing in the future.
I think we've had several individuals we've made to court referrals to.
Yeah, Rosecrans has the tip court team. So that would keep someone from being criminalized maybe for their behavior that has to do with mental health, and then they can seek treatment instead. So we've referred to the tip court also.
And we've been working with the probation officers, juvenile and adult, as some of the stipulations of their probation is to receive the mental health, I guess, services to kind of assist them too. So.
And as you continue to grow, do you foresee the unit, maybe it's not just one unit, but responding to 911 calls instead of just following up afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, I think if the unit would grow, you know, in the future to a much larger unit, right now it's impossible for us to respond to all the calls for service that we follow up on. We just don't have enough staff. But I think if it did grow and the community really liked this unit, that would definitely be a possibility.
Do you believe that the pandemic or current events have increased the need for mental health services in our community?
Absolutely.
Yes, I think we see this quite a bit. Well, we kind of see it across the board, but I think with teens, with adolescents who, you know, it's a change for them. Yeah, we've definitely seen that kind of the rhetoric and the division in the country, and then you know, just the fear that the pandemic has brought. You know, I think as a community, we're all kind of going through it, but there are some populations that tend to be a little bit more vulnerable.
We have some people that, you know, if both people have lost their jobs and they're in the house together all day long and they're trying to e-learn kids, and, you know, they're wondering where their money's coming from. There's an increase in some domestic violence calls. There is definitely to where they'll come out and say, I've been in my house, I'm stuck in my house, I'm a social person, I'm struggling. So then we'll try to link them. It's loosening up now. Back then, we try to link them to some virtual things or things that could help them so they can feel like they still are socializing. So we do see a lot of people that are struggling due to, you know, financial and just to be, you know, quarantined or, you know, not being able to get out. So, and then the financial needs too. So, and that just adds more stressors, and it's stressors on top of stressors. And then they go into crisis, and then that's an even bigger stressor. And so now we have to be able to revolve around what their needs are and get them linked accordingly, so we can help hopefully prevent, you know, before that crisis even happens. When they're just struggling, we want to get them at that stage when they notice they're struggling, and then prevent the crisis from even occurring in the first place.
I'm not sure if you know the answer to this off the top of your head, but do you believe there's been a rise in 911 calls this past year because of all of those things?
I don't know if we have a number for that. Just because if you look at it from year to year, it may not have changed in number just due to COVID. You know, it could have been any more reasons than just COVID. I can't relate it back to, you know, date to date, this is the reason, or the number was higher.
If an individual is a client of a mental health program, do you get permission from them to reach out to their program or their counselor? If you have involvement with them, do you need contact with their counselor?
Yeah, if we needed to get a release of information for any one of the clients in order to reach out farther than we're able to for a continuation of care, we for sure will make sure that is going to happen. Their privacy is very important to us as a team, and we want to make sure they know everything's confidential unless it is stated otherwise by them, and make sure we can move forward talking with anybody with their permission.
And we, as much as we are a team across the board, I mean, we sit at our round table all the time, there is a limit of the information sharing that we've gone through with each of the departments, that we share information between us that is going to be service driven, not to the point of their chart notes or anything that would involve HIPAA. We've gone through the HIPAA training, and we don't cross the lines between the two systems in that manner, if that helps kind of answer that.
If there's a person in crisis, like in need of hospitalization, and Swedish American does not have a bed, have you sent people out of our community to get hospitalized? Or have you supported a family in doing so with their loved one?
Well, even if they go to OSF, and OSF does not have the mental health division, they are actually contracted with Rosecrans. So if a client gets sent to St. Anthony, sorry for those of you that maybe not know what is OSF, St. Anthony OSF, then our triage clinician from Mulberry, right now, they used to go out in person and then respond to the hospital up to St. Anthony. They have been doing telehealth, and the doctors at the hospital have that all set up. They might go there, and OSF reaches out to us. Sometimes clients cannot be assessed right away due to maybe their alcohol content, or that they had to maybe lightly sedate them due to the needs they were having. So we make sure that they, and then we will assess them. If they need, we might send them to Mulberry, but if they need a higher level of care, our team Mulberry's team, Rosecrans Mulberry's team will, with the hospital, find placement for that client. And that could be Streamwood, Chicago Behavioral, Elgin, just whatever place that meets their needs. So we can find them placement through that system. They also sometimes take them to Mercy. And then Mercy takes over with finding placement for them there.
Will you ultimately, do you think, be helping training other officers? I guess, and like awareness for people with mental illness?
Yeah, I
And
don't
how to
know if the
respond?
training's gonna go from here, but like Stacy said earlier, you know, we go through a lot of training in the academy. We go through training yearly with, you know, CIT stuff. So officers are constantly getting training throughout their careers. I don't know, you know, if they're gonna want us to assist in training the, you know, new hires that we get when it comes to what we're doing. But I don't know if we'll be in on that training level. You know, we haven't really been discussing that at all.
Alrighty. Do you see, or have you seen since you've begun any changes that you think are needed right now to improve the program? Or have you just been kind of changing as you go?
I think we've been adapting with it.
Yeah, I think
As
it's
the
ever
needs, yeah.
evolving.
Yeah.
A lot of it has been trial and error. If something hasn't worked, even with the same client. That's why we're talking about the 3 attempts to contact them if they haven't necessarily been responsive to, you know, not always people like a police officer pulling up to their house and they don't want to talk to us at their door, but they'd rather text us or call us or whatever it is, FaceTime us. We've kind of just been open to whatever line of communication we can get with them that they're comfortable with and just kind of worked with it from there.
I thought we would have to do, you know, like they say sometimes often you have to do something wrong in order to realize that the right way to have to do it. And I don't think we've really seen a lot of that. You know, I think we've, I wouldn't say it was wrong way. We just bettered it and adapted it to kind of just fit the needs that we saw the community was in need of.
Do you foresee being funded by the mental health board taxes money eventually, maybe? I'm sorry. Do you, from the mental health tax, do you foresee maybe your team being funded by that in the future?
I think that's what our team leaders, I guess you could say supervisors, are working towards. They talked about it a little bit in the news piece yesterday for the community and kind of let them know what their intentions were to go forward with getting funding so we can keep it a permanent program.
With regard to coordinating services, can you give some examples of that? I'm not sure I understand that question quite.
I mean, we've talked about Lifescape and RAMP and Rosecrans, private counseling, Aspen.
Legal services.
Yeah, I don't think there has been a limit to what we've come across yet, and it's expanding even day to day, honestly.
You know, Ms. Carly also gave us a nice shout out just to deal with, like, you know, Ms. Carly in situations where maybe someone was homeless and we weren't able to locate them, and then they'll go to Ms. Carly's to get some basic needs, and she'll let us know, you know, that she's seen them, so we could go ahead and make sure that they don't fall through the cracks and we can bridge that gap and they don't just keep, you know, getting petitioned or Form 5'd and then released back on the street and then back into, you know, to the homelessness, and try to get them linked so we can get them some permanent services.
What is the youngest age you've responded to with mental health needs in the past 60 days?
Six or eight, I think. Yeah.
It was 6.
Yeah, we've dealt with families, so all ages there, but I think our youngest client was right around 6 years old, and then we've had some elderly people that we've, you know, talked with, so someone in their late 70s, even
older.
and
Yeah.
even 80s.
And I have many questions on how to get in touch with you guys, whether that's for another presentation or to talk about resources. Is there any email you guys would like to share or phone?
Yeah, we can get it to you to send out to the participants if you want, our office number as well as all of our emails.
Okay, I can do that. I will stop you at an hour because I've tried to facilitate all those questions as best as I could.
You did a good job.
There were some doubles, so I
hope
was trying to
we're able
play
to
around.
answer as best as, what their intention was of asking and to the best of our ability.
Right, and I mean, if people have further questions, they can reach out as well.
Absolutely.
Yep.
No, thank you guys, and I got a
And if
lot
we
of
don't
things.
have the answer, we can, if we don't have the answers ourselves, we'll find someone who does. So
I like that motto. No, thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time, and you got a lot of thank yous on here as well.
thanks
So-
for the interest.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Have a good night.
You
You
too.
too.